So, welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Ambassador John. And at the end of our first little section, we alluded to a little bit about some of the lived experience and how it sort of helped inform them where they are. So, I think it's important, for the audience to understand that someone can come from an area where, they've had sort of challenges sort of growing up and how they've overcome them. To share that sort of story as much as you wish to with the people sort of watching today. So, take us back, John, if you would be kind enough to a point where you'd like to sort of share where things started for you.
Started not liking school at all.
Okay.
Non-traditional school. So I was bullied at school. I was more interested in. I grew up in a seaside town.
Okay.
So I was more interested in the arcades than I was in the classrooms.
So what was your seaside town, John?
Scarborough.
Scarborough, all right.
Yorkshire,
Oh, okay.
So I grew up in the arcades.
Yeah.
I had psoriasis, so I was picked on and bullied at school. And I didn't like the classroom anyway. I didn't like the traditional teaching. I didn't get on well with the systems. I bumped against it all the time. So I ended up getting into trouble, committing crimes, petty crimes at 13, 14 started then. I only started getting caught once I'd left school and once I'd actually, my 16th birthday present from my mum and dad was a flat on the next street down. It was, I was so much trouble at that.
So that's not necessarily a good thing? Yeah.
No, it's, and on my way I went. But I was self-sufficient since 16 and I used to run into problems or run into issues and I'd run away from them. I'd leave the town or I'd move to a different place or a different landlord or a different, so I quickly started to get known by the police and I started having a record. I started with shoplifting and theft and dwelling burglary and commercial burglaries. That's pretty much it. Awesome car. I can't drive, but I was,
You're good with cars,
opening cars and taking the stereos back out in the day and that kind of general silliness. But it ended up with me having 19 convictions and 7 custodials. Yes.
Okay, so that's sort of a long way from where we are now.
Yeah.
Do you think that you talk about the car, so the tinkering should we say, with things like sort of electronics and the arcade, so has that been your passion?
Since I was a kid, my mum and dad used to come home from the pub and I'd be in the front room with the video player out in bits, but all organised, everything all sorted and everything. I could put it all back together again, but they used to hit the roof at me every time they wanted to go off because I used to take everything apart and put it back together again.
So that was your sort of love of electronics, computers as well? Because you're very.
And I had a ZX Spectrum and I was coding and I was machine basic.
Not much coding on a 1K machine, is it?
No, 48K ZX.
48K. Oh, right, not ZX80.
No, ZX Spectrum 48K.
That's, as you say, and it's.
But I remember one of the first things because it used to make so much noise. I took it apart because I wanted to play it after bedtime.
Right, okay.
So I took it all apart, found out what was making the noise and silenced it, and then put it all back together again. And that was one of my first introductions to the inside of electronics.
Okay. So again, skills and talents, isn't it, in terms of finding something that you're interested in, and if you're not, as you say, the traditional way of learning at school wasn't to take things apart. I'm slightly older than you, but in terms of it was traditional teaching, wasn't it? Chalk and talk. If you
they just talked
didn't learn in a certain way, you were chucked at the back of the class, thicky McThick, ball rubbers, you name it, kept around the ear.
I got a chair chucked to me once because I wasn't paying attention.
Did it work?
No.
No, it didn't work, did it? No. And I think you said before, coming through the custodial sort of system, and the number of offences and the criminal convictions and the being a sort of prison, that sort of helps you sort of have an empathy, I suppose.
Because I became my own barrier. I was my own problem. I was my own writer of my own story, and I'd miswritten it.
Okay, so fast forward a little bit in terms of coming out. Obviously, clearly enterprising, want to do sort of things. You said before, so big issue seller was the thing. That
I was a big issue seller in around 2000 or so, and I had an epiphany. I was in the same building, in the same Salvation Army in Hull, actually, on the same floor, but not in the same room, but looking out over the same view. And 10 years prior, I was on that. In that same one, and I was back there with nothing to show, just the clothes on my back, looking out over the same view, and I thought to myself, how did I end up back here? What's led me to this? And it was the realisation of a series of bad, wrong choices. And it was in that moment, in that epiphany, that I decided that everything starts with a thought, and that I was going to retrain my brain and stop it from making bad choices. When in good situations, don't do stupid things.
Right.
And it's, I went through the honeymoon period, and I was good for the first year, and then it became difficult through year 3, year 4, year 5. But then I found a family, and I became involved in a relationship, and I settled with 5 kids, and they became my anchor. And then Recycle IT, I became involved with that.
And do you think sort of that, having that sort of sense of purpose and sense of belonging, with the family, sort of helped stabilise yourself?
Definitely,
Understanding, the world of work and stable family, and we know, from the research and our own sort of conversations that, if someone, is involved in criminality, but they get settled with a family, get settled with a job, get settled with the right mindset, they're less likely to reoffend, because some of the triggers are removed. And I think, that's
24 years ago that was.
24 years.
Yeah, and I've not committed offence, I've not been PNC'd, I've not been stopped by the police. I don't think about, oh shit, there's a coppers again.
No, and that's quite important. So, fast forward a little bit to sort of now, we've known each other a couple of years, and obviously Recycle IT as a social enterprise in Bolton, it's growing, you're director of a company. So did you ever think, growing up, that you would be a director of a company that's,
I thought I was going to be a games maker.
Yeah?
I thought I was actually going to be, there was a time when we all did when we were kids, loads of us. I thought I was going to make games. And I did make one, and I sent it off to Ocean, and they nicked the character out of it, and they made it into somewhere else.
Ocean, blumming out, that Ocean software.
Ocean software, And I thought I was going to actually become, but then life and criminality and labour, I was working, labouring all over the place, doing different jobs and different things. But then I'd messed them up. And,
that's fine. So I think, in sort of to summarise this as part, we sort of understand that, you've come from a place where you clearly had skills and talents. They were not being recognised and utilised in one way, which led to criminality. The light bulb moment in terms of I need to change, and I think it comes from within. But I think what's sort of really good, in terms of yourself, and we'll talk about the ambassador program in the third sort of section. You now have that ability to go and talk to people that you've been in the same situation.
I can relate.
You can relate. And how do you feel that is important for someone who listen to us when we go in to talk about self-employment or running a business, how they can change their lives through entrepreneurship? How do you feel that they react when someone comes in that would have been in their shoes previously? Do you think it's a positive thing?
It's a positive, definitely.
Excellent. That's really, really good. So we will conclude there, John, and we'll talk about Recycle IT in the future and Ambassadors Programme in the final section.